Pierce Brosnan. For many, the name alone brings to mind tuxedos, fast cars, and the unshakable elegance of James Bond. He was the hero who seemed untouchable, the man who made the world believe in charm, strength, and style. But the truth behind the screen tells a very different story. Pierce Brosnan has endured more loss than most men could ever survive. He has stood at graves no husband should face. He has buried a daughter no father should lose. And even today, at the age of 72, his battles are not over. Every smile hides scars. Every success has been paid for with unthinkable pain. This is not just the story of James Bond. It is the story of a man who learned how to live with heartbreak and still find love in the ruins. Before we begin, let me ask you a question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Pierce Brosnan? Not as an actor, but as a man. Leave your answer in the comments, because your voice matters here.
The tragedy of Pierce Brosnan did not begin in Hollywood. It began in Ireland in 1953, in a quiet town where his story started with the sound of a door closing. A father left and never returned. There was no accident to explain the absence, no farewell to soften the wound. His father simply vanished. For Pierce, there was only silence where a father's voice should have been. His mother, May, tried her best. She worked as a nurse, struggling to create a life for the two of them. But survival demanded sacrifice. When Pierce was only 4, she made the most painful decision a mother could make. She left for London to find work, promising it would only be for a short while. That short while became 7 long years. In her absence, Pierce was passed between relatives, first to his grandparents in Navan, then to an aunt and uncle in Trim. Every home had its own rules, its own tempers, its own air of impermanence. For a boy so young, it felt like living in fragments. He learned to keep quiet, to observe instead of speak, to become the child who blended into the background. Yet teachers noticed something. Behind his silence, there was a spark, a brightness hidden in his eyes. He would sit at his desk, staring out the window as if searching for a world far away, one that he could not yet name. In 1964, life shifted again. Pierce's mother returned to Ireland with a new husband, William Carmichael. William was patient and kind. He never tried to replace the father who had disappeared. Instead, he taught Pierce simple things: how to fish, how to fix what was broken, how to trust again. That same year, William took him to the cinema. On the screen was Sean Connery in Goldfinger. The music, the danger, the charm of James Bond filled the theater. Pierce watched with wide eyes, his heart pounding. In that dark cinema, a spark was lit. He thought to himself, "That is the man I want to be, strong, confident, untouchable." Through his teenage years, he carried that spark. He entered St. Martin's School of Art in London, imagining a future as a painter. His heroes were Francis Bacon and Lucian Freud. His tools were brushes, not cameras. But destiny had already chosen another path. In 1971, fate arrived quietly. Pierce was wandering the streets of London when he stumbled into a small theater workshop. Inside, a performer was practicing the art of fire eating. The flames danced, the crowd of students watched in awe. Most people would have walked past. Pierce did not. He asked to try. That single, impulsive decision changed his future forever. The troupe saw something unexpected in him, a natural presence, a quiet strength, the weight of a young man who had already endured more than his years. They welcomed him, and for the first time, acting became part of his life. Soon after, Pierce was accepted into the Drama Center London, one of the most demanding acting schools in the country. Many students gave up under the pressure. Pierce stayed. He worked odd jobs to survive. He studied Shakespeare. He trained in mime and even in circus performance. He had no safety net, no wealthy family to fall back on. What he carried was hunger. The hunger of a boy who had started with nothing and had promised himself to never end with nothing. By 1976, his determination brought results. He landed his first professional stage role in the thriller Wait Until Dark. A year later, he impressed audiences in Tennessee Williams' The Red Devil Battery Sign, a play that had failed in America but found new life in London because of his magnetic performance. And then, in 1980, came his first steps into film. He appeared with Elizabeth Taylor in The Mirror Cracked. His role lasted less than 30 seconds. His paycheck was only £50. But for Pierce Brosnan, it was proof that the journey had begun.
In 1982, destiny opened its doors wider. Pierce Brosnan auditioned for a minor background role in a new NBC detective series called Remington Steele. The producers expected a simple supporting player. Instead, the moment Pierce walked into the room, the atmosphere changed. He did not leave with a small role, he left with the lead. When Remington Steele premiered, it became an instant success. 15 million viewers tuned in every week. The show aired in more than 80 countries and made Pierce Brosnan a household name. With fame came whispers. Critics and fans began to call him the next James Bond. The resemblance to Sean Connery's suave confidence was undeniable. It was both a blessing and a curse. The label followed him everywhere. Casting directors saw him not only as an actor, but as the man destined to wear the tuxedo. Yet timing, as it so often did in his life, would play its cruel hand. By the mid-1880s, he was standing at the edge of the role he had dreamed of since boyhood. But fate was not ready to let him have it. In 1986, the long wait seemed to be over. Roger Moore was preparing to step down from the role of James Bond. The producers wanted a new face, someone who could carry the franchise into the future. All eyes turned to Pierce Brosnan. It felt like destiny. He had the look, the charm, the elegance. Even Albert Broccoli, the legendary Bond producer, once remarked, "If he can act, he is my man." For Pierce, the childhood spark in that cinema years ago was about to become real. But life had a different plan. Just as Pierce was preparing to step into the role, NBC suddenly announced that Remington Steele would return for another season. Contractually, he was trapped. The role of Bond slipped through his fingers, handed instead to Timothy Dalton. In public, Pierce remained gracious. He praised Dalton, smiled for the cameras, and kept moving forward. In private, the disappointment cut deep. For the next 8 years, often called the Lost Bond years, Pierce continued to work. He appeared in thrillers like The Fourth Protocol, in dark dramas like Nomads, and even in Diet Coke commercials, where he wore tuxedos that mocked the role that had eluded him. It was a cruel reminder of what might have been. Yet behind the smile, he never let go of the dream. He waited. He endured. He kept himself ready. In 1994, the call finally came. Long before the tuxedo, long before the betrayals of Hollywood, there was Cassandra Harris. She was elegant, witty, and already an established actress when she met Pierce in the late 1970s. She was also a mother of 2, Charlotte and Christopher. Most men might have hesitated at stepping into an instant family. Pierce did not. He embraced them as his own. He married Cassandra in 1980, and 3 years later they welcomed a son together, Sean. For a while, life seemed full of light. In family photographs, Pierce's smile was not the polished charm of a rising star. It was the deep and genuine joy of a man who had finally found home. He once said, "I was not a father. I was just Pierce. And then I became Daddy." But in 1987, everything changed. While working overseas, Cassandra began to feel an unusual fatigue and persistent pain. At first, they thought it was exhaustion from travel. Back in London, the doctors delivered the truth with merciless clarity. Ovarian cancer, already advanced. Pierce later said it felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. One moment they were living a normal life. The next, everything was shattered. Their days became filled with hospital corridors, chemotherapy wards, and silent nights filled with dread. Over 4 long years, Cassandra endured countless surgeries and brutal treatments. The disease stole her strength, her energy, and her hair, but never her dignity. She faced each day with grace. She asked for honesty. She made her own decisions, and she left everyone in awe of her courage. Pierce described himself as the quiet partner, always there, holding her hand, offering steadiness when there were no answers. At home, their little boy sometimes wore a toy doctor's coat, pretending to cure his mother with plastic stethoscopes. It was innocent and sweet, yet utterly devastating, because they all knew pretend medicine could not stop what was coming. On December 28, 1991, one day after their 11th wedding anniversary, Cassandra passed away at the age of 43. Pierce was by her side. Their son Sean was only 8 years old. Grief settled into every corner of their lives. Yet Pierce did what he had always done. He carried the weight quietly. He became the anchor for the children, even as he was breaking inside. Pierce believed that losing Cassandra was the deepest wound a man could ever bear. He thought nothing could equal the pain of watching the woman he loved more than life itself slip away. But fate was not finished with him. Decades later, the same merciless illness returned. This time, it came for his daughter, Charlotte. Charlotte was radiant, warm, and resilient. She carried her mother's grace in her smile and her kindness in every gesture. But hidden within her body was the same genetic shadow, the same disease that had stolen Cassandra. At the age of 40, Charlotte began to feel the first signs: a dull fatigue, a persistent ache. At first, nothing alarming. But Pierce recognized the rhythm instantly. He knew this silence, this dread, this storm. The tests confirmed his worst fears: ovarian cancer, already advanced. Pierce later said it felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. One moment they were living a normal life. The next, everything was shattered. Their days became filled with hospital corridors, chemotherapy wards, and silent nights filled with dread. Over 4 long years, Charlotte endured countless surgeries and brutal treatments. The disease stole her strength, her energy, and her hair, but never her dignity. She faced each day with grace. She asked for honesty. She made her own decisions, and she left everyone in awe of her courage. Pierce described himself as the quiet partner, always there, holding her hand, offering steadiness when there were no answers. At home, their little boy sometimes wore a toy doctor's coat, pretending to cure his mother with plastic stethoscopes. It was innocent and sweet, yet utterly devastating, because they all knew pretend medicine could not stop what was coming. On June 28, 2013, 2 weeks after their 11th wedding anniversary, Charlotte passed away at the age of 41. Pierce was by her side. Their son Sean was only 8 years old. Grief settled into every corner of their lives. Yet Pierce did what he had always done. He carried the weight quietly. He became the anchor for the children, even as he was breaking inside. Pierce believed that losing Cassandra was the deepest wound a man could ever bear. He thought nothing could equal the pain of watching the woman he loved more than life itself slip away. But fate was not finished with him. Through the storms, through the silence of grief, there was one presence that gave Pierce Brosnan the strength to keep living. Her name was Keely Shaye Smith. They met in 1994 at a beach party in Cabo San Lucas. Pierce was not looking for love. He was still carrying the weight of Cassandra's loss, still trying to hold himself together for his children. But Keely was different. She was calm, wise, and uninterested in the Hollywood spotlight. She did not see only the actor or the rising Bond star. She saw the man behind the smile, the man who still carried wounds too deep to name. In those early years, she did not try to erase his grief or demand that he move on. She simply stayed. She stayed through the sleepless nights. She stayed through the anniversaries that felt like open wounds. She stayed when Pierce felt like falling apart. In 2001, they married in an ancient abbey surrounded by friends and family. For Pierce, it was more than a wedding. It was proof that love could still bloom even in a life scarred by tragedy. Together they welcomed 2 sons, Dylan and Paris. Keely became not only his wife, but his anchor. She created a home where birthdays were celebrated, where laughter filled the rooms, and where love was not afraid of shadows. She never asked him to forget Cassandra or Charlotte. Instead, she helped him live with their absence while still finding joy in the present. Over the years, the outside world was often cruel. After the births of their children, tabloids targeted Keely for her weight, mocking her appearance in headlines. Pierce never wavered. He defended her openly, saying, "I love every curve of her body. She is the most beautiful woman in my eyes." And in 2024, when Keely revealed that she had lost more than 100 pounds for her own health, it was never about proving herself to others. It was her personal journey, her gift to herself and her family. For Pierce, this was no surprise. He had always known her strength. The world was only seeing what he had cherished all along. He once said simply, "Keely saved me. She gave me the will to keep going." With her, he did not find an escape from grief. He found the endurance to live with it, not a distraction from the past, but a reason to keep building a future.
Even with Keely by his side, life still tested Pierce in ways that few could bear. There was another wound, one that did not come with funerals or gravestones, but that cut just as deeply. Christopher was Cassandra's son from her first marriage. Pierce had adopted him as his own. From the beginning, there was no step, no half, only father and son. They shared laughter, time on film sets, and the easy bond of family. For years, they were inseparable. But when Cassandra passed away, something inside Christopher shifted. Unlike Charlotte, who held the family together with quiet grace, and unlike Sean, who leaned on Pierce for strength, Christopher carried his grief in silence. That silence slowly turned into battles with addiction. At first, it was hidden. Then came the legal troubles, the close calls, the terrifying nights when it seemed he might not survive. Pierce tried everything a father could. He paid for treatment centers, offered forgiveness, gave countless second chances. Sometimes he simply sat with him in silence, hoping his presence alone might be enough. But love, no matter how deep, cannot always save someone who is not ready to be saved. In later years, Pierce admitted the hardest truth. "Christopher is still very lost. I know where he is, but he is living a hard life. He knows how to come back, but he does not want to." There was no anger in his words, only sorrow. The sorrow of a father who had run out of ways to rescue his child. Eventually, for the sake of his own survival and the stability of his other children, Pierce made the hardest choice a parent can make. He stepped back. He never stopped loving, he never stopped hoping, but he had to love from a distance. Years passed. Christopher faded from public life. When he reappeared, older and frailer, the change was heartbreaking. For Pierce, it felt like another kind of funeral, a loss without closure, a goodbye that was never spoken. On Father's Day in 2022, Pierce shared a rare message that included Christopher's name. It was simple, but it spoke louder than any headline. The love never left. It never will. This is the quiet devastation of a parent who has not lost a child to death, but to life itself. A grief that lingers every day, in the silence between phone calls, in the empty chair at the table, and in the unshakable hope that maybe, one day, the story will not be over. At 72, Pierce Brosnan is no longer the rising star in a tuxedo or the action hero leaping from explosions. He is a man who has carried decades of heartbreak, yet chosen to keep living with grace. For nearly 20 years, his sanctuary was Orchid House, a Thai-inspired estate on the beaches of Malibu. Built with Keely, it became a place of healing, filled with light, art, and family. In 2020, they sold it for a record $100 million. Today, he divides his time between a coastal home in Malibu and a retreat in Kauai, Hawaii. Both places give him what he calls the horizon, a view of the ocean that brings him calm and clarity. These homes are not monuments to wealth, they are sanctuaries. Walls lined with his paintings, gardens he tends with his own hands, rooms that echo with the laughter of his children and grandchildren. Privacy is sacred to him now. His mornings often begin with coffee on the terrace beside Keely, followed by long barefoot walks along the shore. The salt air softens the weight of memory. In those quiet moments, the man who once played James Bond is simply a husband, a father, and a survivor. Family remains the center of his life. With Keely, he has built a foundation of stability and love. Their two sons, Dylan and Paris, are pursuing creative paths in music, modeling, and art. His older children, Sean and Christopher, are still part of a family that has known both triumph and unbearable tragedy. As a grandfather, he treasures every moment with Isabella and Lucas, the children of his late daughter Charlotte. Health is something he treats with discipline and gratitude. He keeps a steady diet of fresh produce and seafood, avoids processed foods, and values moderation. Exercise is simple but consistent. Morning swims in the Pacific, long coastal walks, yoga sessions, and light strength training. His goal is not only to remain fit for work, but to sustain the energy he needs for his family and his causes. Creatively, he remains active. He chooses roles more carefully now, appearing in both independent dramas and major streaming projects. But yet it is painting that remains his deepest outlet. It began as therapy during Cassandra's illness, a way to release pain onto canvas. Today, his bold and colorful abstract works have been exhibited and even auctioned for charity. Pierce is financially secure, with a fortune estimated in the tens of millions of dollars. But accumulation has never been his true purpose. Contribution has. As a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, he has championed children's rights and disaster relief. Alongside Keely, he has supported environmental groups like Greenpeace and the Natural Resources Defense Council, raising his voice for clean oceans and climate justice. And always, at the heart of his advocacy, there is cancer research. In memory of Cassandra and Charlotte, he has spoken at fundraisers, donated quietly, and used his voice to remind the world of the battle that scarred his family so deeply. Time has left his marks on Pierce Brosnan. His hair has turned silver, his steps are more deliberate, and his face carries the lines of a life fully lived. But none of these are signs of weakness. They are proof that he has endured. The world still knows him as James Bond, as Remington Steele, as the actor who saved a fading franchise with GoldenEye. But the truth is that his greatest role was never on screen. His greatest role has been survival. He has buried the love of his life. He has stood helpless as his daughter fought the same merciless illness. He has watched a son drift away and prayed for his return. And still, he chooses to love. Still, he chooses to create. Still, he chooses to live. When asked about life, Pierce once said, "Life has to go on. And if it does, you better find something worth living for." For him, that something is no longer about escaping danger in a tuxedo. It is about protecting his family, creating art, and using his voice for causes that matter. The absences of Cassandra and Charlotte remain with him. They are not wounds that time erased. They are presences that walk beside him every day. But with Keely, with his children, and with his grandchildren, Pierce has built a life where grief and joy can exist together. At 72, his legacy is not measured by box office numbers or magazine covers. It is measured by resilience, by love, and by the way he has transformed unimaginable pain into purpose. Perhaps that is the lesson of his story, that even after loss, there can be renewal. Even after heartbreak, there can be love. And even after tragedy, there can still be hope. Which chapter of Pierce Brosnan's journey speaks to you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, do not forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder that hope can survive anything.